So in this talk, I'm going to focus on avatars and our relationship to people. And it's probably the second biggest challenge for us as avatars is how we relate to people. And with people, I specifically mean the original inhabitants of the earth, the beings who were in embodiment on earth before we came here. And I call that the second biggest challenge because the biggest challenge is how we relate to fallen beings. But that I will talk about in a separate talk. So here we are. We are born into some kind of family, some kind of society. We grow up. We are not told that we are any different than most of the people around us. We have no concept that we are avatars, that we came from a natural planet. And we have no concept that because we came from a natural planet, we have a frame of reference that there's a different kind of planet. There's a different way for people to live together than what we see around us here on Earth. We don't know this with our conscious minds, but we sense it intuitively. You know, there's so many things that we don't understand why people treat each other this way. We don't understand all of the things that are happening on Earth. And often we have a sense that we have to do something about it. We should find a way to help, to make society better, to help people. And we're often focused on helping people. And so there came a point, and it was actually after I've been on the spiritual path for many years, but what I started seeing in myself was that ever since I was a child, I could see I had this tension in my relationship to other people. This deep inner tension. And I met many, many spiritual people who feel the same way. You can probably recognize it in yourself. So I started looking into this, and of course, you know, there can be various reasons for it. But as an avatar, what I discovered was that the basic dynamic is that I feel I'm here to help other people, that I want to change other people. I want to see them change so they don't suffer, so they're not trapped in all the patterns they are trapped in. And of course, I want to help remove the big problems on Earth like war and poverty and many other things. So I want to help people, but on the other hand, I feel powerless to do so. And when I started looking at why I felt powerless, I realized that it had actually two aspects. One was my desire to help people, but I'll return to that. The other one was that I didn't have any resolution of the way I looked at free will. And this was very confusing to me in the beginning because it's kind of a contradiction that I discovered in myself. Because when I look back at my life, I've always been a very peaceful person. I've not been forceful with others. I've not been aggressive. I've never tried to manipulate people. I always felt as a child that the worst thing I could possibly do was to hurt other people's feelings. And again, I see this in many other spiritual people. We are generally, as spiritual people, we are not aggressive. We are not forceful with others. So, in a sense, you have to say that I have always had this respect for free will. And as avatars, we often have this. We have a certain respect for free will. Because on the one hand, we look at Earth, and whether we realize this consciously or not, we see that a lot of the problems that are happening on Earth is because there are some people that are clearly willing to force the free will of others. We don't call them fallen beings because we don't have that terminology, but it starts with the fallen beings. There are, of course, other people among the original inhabitants of the Earth who are willing to force others. So we see that a part of the problem on Earth is this conflict that's created because there are some people that are always trying to force others to comply with their view, their ideology, their religion, their political philosophy, or whatever it may be. So we clearly see that there are some people that don't respect the free will. And we feel that this is wrong, and therefore we, of course, would not want to do this. So in a sense, we have this respect for free will. We don't want to force others. But on the other hand, we have this drive to help others. And we see that people are stuck they are stuck in all kinds of patterns. I've talked about it before, how my father, when he was 10 years old, because of certain reactionary patterns in his psychology, his life became locked on a track, and he couldn't get off of it for the rest of his life. And I saw this in my childhood. I sensed his frustration. I wanted to help him, but of course I didn't know how to. And even as an adult, I didn't really know how to. And even today, if he was alive, he died in 1987, but if he was alive, I'm not even sure I could help him, because he was closed-minded. His mind was very, very closed. And that's, of course, what we see in a lot of people on Earth. I have my family here in Denmark. Now that I'm back in Denmark after many years, I interact with them, of course. But they're also very close to any kind of spiritual ideas, any kind of ideas that go beyond what they were brought up to believe in. So we see, as avatars, we see this. What causes a lot of problems, what causes a lot of suffering for people, is that they are closed-minded. And then, of course, as avatars, we find the spiritual path, we find some kind of spiritual teaching, and we experience that all of a sudden a whole new world opens up for us compared to what we were brought up with. Compared to the worldview we had as we were brought up, now the spiritual path opens up an entirely new worldview. We feel so much freer, we understand a lot more things. And of course we think, oh, everybody wants this. I'm feeling so much better. I want other people to feel better. And obviously they will feel better if they saw what I saw. Everybody's going to want this. It's just a matter of telling them. So then we go out and try and tell them, and what are we met with? Just a closed wall, blank rejection. Don't want to have anything to do with this. And so, on the one hand, we see this. People are closed-minded. That's why they're suffering, and that's why they can't get out of suffering. We want to help, but we also know we can't force people. We can't manipulate them. We don't want to lie to them, of course. So we feel powerless. What can we do? And the first thing that kind of really helped me start to look at this sense of being powerless was that I realized, yes, you may be respecting the free will of other people, but you're not actually respecting your own free will. I look at my life and I look back and I see that I was always, as I said, my biggest fear was that I could hurt other people's feelings. So when I was around other people who had very strong opinions, I didn't want to challenge them. I didn't want to tell them they were wrong. I didn't want to question them. And I didn't want to force anybody. So I tended to be very tolerant, very understanding of other people. And in a sense, it's typical of an empath. And I think many avatars, we are empaths. And we empathize with other people, but we don't want to force them. But I came to the realization, I suddenly saw it. I just had this epiphany, and I saw that in doing this, in reacting this way to other people, I was basically saying I can't be myself around other people. I can't be who I am. I can't be free to express myself, what I think, how I feel, how I look at life. I can't be myself around others because I'm always worrying about their reaction. And I saw that I'm not respecting my own free will. Because what does free will mean? Well, it means that people have a right to be who they are. Right? My father, if he was closed-minded, if he was stubborn, if he didn't want to look at himself, look at his psychology, he had, within the law of free will, he has a right to live that way. And he had a right to live that way for his entire lifetime, which he did. But I also have a right to be who I am. And if I'm open-minded and I'm open to ideas and I like talking about these ideas, why shouldn't I be allowed to do this? Why should I limit myself? Why should I suppress my own feelings, my own worldview, in order to avoid what? Hurting other people's feelings, disturbing them, making them angry. Why should I do this? That is not respecting my free will, my right to live the way I want to live. So that really got me thinking, when I saw this, and it took some time to really process this. But I started realizing here that I have to respect my own free will. But then I also realized that even though I wasn't forcing people, manipulating them into changing, I still had in my mind this idea, but they should change. And the reason why I had this was they're suffering. And suffering isn't good. They should overcome suffering, and therefore they should change. And I am not suffering the way they are doing because I have changed something in my psychology. So obviously, if they change something in their psychology, they wouldn't be suffering either. So therefore, I had in my mind this mental image, this intention that I should be able to help other people to change so they're not suffering. Again, it's not forcing them directly, but I realized it is actually forcing them indirectly because I am having the opinion, the mental image that other people should change. And I had another epiphany after some time where I realized, oh, but this is actually not respecting their free will. And it took me quite some time, probably years, to really process this in my mind, where I realized that the problem I had was that I looked at all the suffering on earth and I said, this is wrong. This shouldn't be happening. And this is, the quintessential reaction we have as avatars. This is probably what brought us to earth. But once we are here in an embodiment, we see all this suffering. And often, at least in the beginning, when we're new on the planet, we are not suffering, but we see other people are. And we have the frame of reference from a natural planet. It's not necessary that people are suffering. It doesn't have to be that way. A planet doesn't have to be in such a way that the vast majority of people on the planet are suffering. Why should it be that way? It doesn't have to be. So once we are down here, it's very easy to make this shift where we say, oh, this is wrong. Suffering is wrong. Earth should be a natural planet. And it's understandable, right? It's we might say a natural reaction when you're coming from a natural planet to an unnatural planet. The problem is, it puts us in this constant state of tension. And that is what I realized. That my tension when it came to other people was because I didn't actually respect their free will fully. I wasn't forcefully manipulating their free will. But I had the opinion that they shouldn't be suffering. Yet I realized, because of the Ascended Master teachings, that people are suffering because of choices they have made. They have chosen, in past lives in most cases, to react a certain way. So they have created what I have called these subconscious selves. And it's those subconscious selves that are causing people to suffer, because a subconscious self is like, as I've explained, like a computer. It can only react a certain way to a certain situation. And this is what causes most of the suffering. People have this subconscious mechanism, causes them to react a certain way to specific outer conditions. They can't change the conditions in many cases, but they are there, so they have to react to them, and they react to them in a way that causes suffering. And the reaction comes from this subconscious self. It's not necessary. It could easily be changed. We don't have it as avatars in the beginning. So we see or sense intuitively that this could be changed. So we want to help other people be free. But what I came to realize was that it was my misunderstanding of what's the purpose of an unnatural planet. See, I thought, when I first heard about this concept of natural and unnatural planets, I thought, well, the Earth shouldn't be an unnatural planet. It should be changed back to being a natural planet as quickly as possible. And in a sense, it's not wrong. That's ultimately the goal of the Ascended Masters. But the Ascended Masters actually accept planet Earth for what it is right now. Because planet Earth is kind of a halfway house. For Like you have this concept that criminals go to a halfway house when they come out of prison because they're not ready to go out in society. Well, what I realized was that the reason why the earth is the way it is, that the vast majority of people on earth are not actually ready to live on a natural planet. If you took most people on earth, transported them to a natural planet, they wouldn't know what to do with themselves. They would probably react very strongly, very negatively, feel it was wrong. And possibly even that they were being forced. And the reason for this is, and this took me, again, some time to realize, is that these people actually want conditions the way they are on Earth. You could say they want to suffer. This is obviously not how they see it, right? They are not consciously thinking, I want to suffer. But the choices they are making, to stay in these reactionary patterns, the inevitable consequence is that they will suffer. And they don't want to look at their psychology. They don't want to question their reactionary patterns. And therefore, indirectly, they want to suffer. And I came to realize that in my mind, I thought this was wrong, that people shouldn't be suffering. And it was not that I wanted to force them to see this, but I wanted to help them, inspire them, help them see that all of their suffering is just in their minds and their psychology, and if they resolve this thing in their minds, they can stop suffering. But of course, the vast majority of people are not willing to look at their psychology. Why? Because, as I've explained in some of my other videos, when you go into the duality consciousness and see yourself as a separate being, you are always projecting out. The problem is out there. The problem is other people, or the government, or the weather, or this or that. And so after some time, I realized that the reason why the Earth is still an unnatural planet is that most people are in this state of mind where they want to be able to project that the problem and the cause of their suffering is outside themselves, because they don't want to look at themselves. They don't want to look in. And this was a shock to me. And I don't know why it should have been. I mean, I should have just been able to look at, all of the people I've observed around me, including my father. But it was a shock to me because I look back, and even when I was a young child, I was always willing to look at myself. And I find many spiritual people, why have we found the spiritual path? Because we are looking at ourselves. We are looking at how could we improve ourselves? How could we improve life, our approach to life? That's why we're open to the spiritual path. So I thought everybody would want to get out of their suffering. Everybody would be open. But I of course observed time and time again as I was growing up that people are not open. So I don't know why it should have been a surprise to me, but I just came to this point where I suddenly realized that people don't actually want to look at themselves. They don't want to, as Jesus said, look at the beam in their own eye. They want to continue looking at the splinter in the eyes of their brothers and projecting that that's the problem. And that their suffering isn't caused by anything in their state of mind, it's caused by these other people and these outer conditions. This is the choice they made a long time ago, and this is a choice that they have been upholding for lifetime after lifetime after lifetime. And so part of what helped me, there was a couple of concepts that helped me process this realization. And the first one that came to me was that the Ascended Master talk about Earth is an educational institution. And there are two ways we learn on Earth. One is we can learn by seeing ourselves as connected beings. We're connected to something outside our own minds, which is ultimately our higher self and the Ascended Masters. So we are receiving direction from within, from that source that's outside our own minds. And of course, we also observe what's going on around us, and we look at our own reactions to what's going on around us. But we are open to looking at ourselves, looking within, looking for answers inside ourselves. The other is, as I've said, people who are not willing to look at themselves. They're projecting that the problem is out there. And that's what the Ascended Masters call the school of hard knocks. Because if you look at most people and the state of mind they're in, The only thing that might make them change is when something happens outside themselves that they can't deny, they can't ignore. And then they are forced to change. I mean, you can see it in people on an individual level, that sometimes people have to go through a severe crisis. It can be all kinds of things, but a severe crisis before they start looking at themselves. You can also see that there are people who experience all kinds of crises and they don't look at themselves. But that's just because I realized that the knocks haven't become hard enough yet. It's like they talk about some people that are addicts, they have to hit rock bottom before they are willing to look at themselves and say, maybe I need to change. But it applies to all people, and so you can see that some people receive a knock that is so hard that they finally, it's like they wake up and say, oh, I have to do something different. I have to look at myself. And then other people can be in a similar situation and they still refuse to look at themselves, which means the knocks just have to become harder and harder and harder. You could see it on a world scale even. And again, growing up in Denmark, Hitler, Nazism, the Holocaust, I would say that if you look at German people before the war, they were very, very trapped in this sense of superiority. They were the master race. And the only thing that changed this was that they got two knocks that were so hard they couldn't deny it. Number one, they lost the war. Number two, the exposure of the Holocaust. And these were so severe knocks that the German nation went through this shift where they said, we have to look at ourselves. And they have, to a very large degree. I'm actually admiring how the German nation has changed. Not everybody, obviously, but a lot of people have. But anyway, that's besides the point. So we see this, the school of hard knocks. And when I realized this, I thought, but because of my empathy with other people, I don't want them to be in the school of hard knocks. I think they shouldn't be in the school of hard knocks. And I actually thought that it should be possible to come up with some kind of argument or reasoning that could help people change without getting the hard knocks. And I should be able to do this. I should be able to come up with this. And I felt that if I couldn't, like my father, if I couldn't come up with an argument that could convince him, and I did try to talk to him when I became an adult and I found the spiritual path and the Center Master teachings. I tried to talk to him, but couldn't really get anywhere. I felt that if I couldn't come up with the argument that would convince him, I wasn't good enough. I didn't have a good enough argument. And therefore, I needed to improve myself. I needed to get better. I needed to look at what can I do to get better at persuading other people. And this was what, as I started out by saying, the tension in me. The tension. I felt I should be able to help people. I experienced I couldn't, and I felt this is my fault. It's mine that isn't good enough. I need to improve myself. So I was constantly in this tension. And so when I processed this idea of the school of hard knocks, I realized, it took me a while, but I realized, but when somebody is in the school of hard knocks, there is nothing that anybody could say that would change their minds. The only thing that will change their minds is that they hit their head against a concrete wall and they realize the concrete wall is not going to yield, so maybe I need to yield. There's nothing I could say. There's nothing even the smartest person on earth couldn't say. And what I realized, not even the ascended masters can say something to these people. And the ascended masters have accepted this, and that's why they are not trying to bring forth a teaching for everybody. They're only giving a teaching for those who are ready to look at themselves. And after processing this for a while, I came to a point where I made peace with this. And it was like, I actually remember, this was probably, 7, 8, maybe 10 years ago, I came to a point where I suddenly said, without thinking about it ahead of time, I suddenly said, I am resigning from the job of changing other people. And I really felt this. I let go of my sense that it was my responsibility to change other people. And if I couldn't, I wasn't good enough. I just let go of it, and it really gave me an enormous sense of peace. And it's like when I let go of this obsessive compulsive, because that's really what it was a form of OCD. I was obsessive compulsive about changing other people, or changing myself so I could persuade other people. I became much more relaxed, and I became more able to say, okay, but I'm here on Earth, I'm an embodiment, I have potentially quite some years to live here on Earth. What do I do? I mean, do I just resign from any kind of trying to teach anybody and live like other people? Or do I say, what do I like to do on Earth? What do I want to do for the rest of my life, and just focus on that? And the reality was that I could look at life on Earth and I could say, there isn't really anything I want to do here. It's not like there are any worldly pleasures, and I find this in many avatars, as I've said before. We didn't come here to enjoy life on Earth. Right? I mean, bodily pleasures, sex, food, downhill skiing. This is not really something that I'm passionate about. And this is not why, it can't fill my life. It's not the purpose of life for me. So I realized, no, I am a spiritual person. I want to be a spiritual person. I want to study spiritual teachings. I want to express myself. I want to, be right about it. And I want to continue to do what I'm doing for the Ascended Masters, but I can do it without detention. I can shift, and then the shift I made is, I am expressing myself, I am expressing my spiritual beliefs, but I'm not doing it in order to change other people. I'm doing it because this is expressing who I am, and it gives me a sense of joy and fulfillment to express who I am. So, in a sense, I detached the results from the process. Before, I had been focused on the results. I have to change other people. I have to change the planet, change society. And now, I was just, all I can do is express myself. All I can do is be myself. If that inspires somebody, fine. But if it doesn't inspire anybody, at least I have the joy out of expressing myself. And so this was, again, took some time to process, but it really was a major shift. I said there were two main ideas that helped me make this shift. Actually, the other one was that his Ascended Masters gave these teachings that the Earth can be compared to a reality simulator. And that it's a device, basically, like a virtual reality goggles or a flight simulator. And it responds to our consciousness. So there's a certain programming in the simulator, but the purpose of it is really to give people who are in embodiment, who are inside the simulator, whatever life experience they want, and to make it seem real to them. And this helped me because it partly ties in with what I said about the School of Hard Knocks. But what really helped me was that there are two phases in the reality simulator. And the first phase that we go into when we come into the simulator is immersion. We are immersing ourselves in the environment created by the simulator. And we can even come to believe that we are a product of that environment, like some people believe that all there is to their minds is brain activity, because we are just biological robots and our brains are doing all the thinking for us. This is total immersion. You can also be a religious person who believes that your environment is created by some almighty God that you have no influence over. So this was the one phase, immersion, where you think you're living in a real world and your mind has no influence on that real world. So then the second phase is the awakening phase. And this is, of course, what we go into when we find the spiritual path. And that's when we start realizing that the reality simulator responds to consciousness, our consciousness. It's the concept I've also talked about the cosmic mirror. Whatever we send out, the cosmic mirror will reflect back to us. The simulator will give us these conditions. Of course, we have to realize this doesn't work just on an individual level, it works on a collective level. So humankind has collectively sent signals into the reality simulator that they want to have a certain life experience on Earth. And as I described, most people want the experience that they live in an environment and their minds have no influence on the environment. They don't have to look at themselves because all of their suffering is caused by the environment or other people. So people are always looking out, and they're thinking they don't have to look at the beam in their own eye. That's unnecessary. And so when you go into the awakening phase, you begin to realize that the reality simulator, the environment you're in, actually responds to consciousness. Your state of consciousness has something to do with not only the conditions you experience, but also how you react to those conditions. And the very first thing you can do is change your reactions. Even if you can't change outer conditions because they're created collectively, you can certainly create your reactions. And that means you don't have to suffer. Even if outer conditions don't change, your state of mind can change, so you don't have to suffer. And that is achieved by looking at the beam in your own eye, pulling out that beam, or the many subconscious cells that we have, and therefore you can be on Earth without suffering like most people are. And this was very, very helpful to me. And in a sense you could say that, talking about empathy, we are empaths. And in a sense you could say that what has happened to me as a result of going through all of this is that I have become less empathetic. Because I don't feel anymore the strong feelings that I had when I was a child, for example, when I saw other people suffering. I still remember when I was a very young child, before I even went to school, there was, as I've said before, there was a country in Africa called Biafra where they had anyway, they were hungry. Famine was the word I was looking for. So they had all these children, and they showed them on Danish TV. Body looked like skeletons, but had this huge belly that was all filled with air. And I looked at these children, and they were just like me. I mean, yeah, they had a little darker skin, but they were children like me. And I couldn't understand that we, as a world, could allow this to happen. And I felt so strongly, I felt so badly about this happening. And again, I've known many, many spiritual people who had other things that we feel very strongly about. And of course, you can always say, I understand this, you only say, but these children hadn't chosen to starve. No, but collectively, humankind has made the choices that have created these kind of totally unbalanced conditions on Earth. And so you always see that, you start to see that the vast majority of conditions on Earth are actually a result of what human beings have done collectively, creating all these imbalances. And when you start to see this, and this is what I did. I mean, I came to a point also where I said, okay, if I really respect other people's free will, if I really respect that they have a right to make the choices, they don't want to look at themselves, they want to project that it's outer conditions, and if I really understand that this is what causes their suffering, why do I need to feel empathy for their suffering? Why do I need to feel it so strongly? Because again, is that respecting my free will? That I feel obligated somehow to feel bad because other people are suffering. When I realize the equation of free will, if I respect their free will and my free will, why should I feel obligated to suffer because other people suffer? Why should I feel this tension? And I started looking at this, working with this over a period of time, and I realized that, first of all, if me feeling bad because other people are suffering doesn't actually help them. And it doesn't actually help the situation on Earth. Because as I've explained, we have the collective consciousness, which is an energy field. And in this collective consciousness, there are these vortexes of energy. Fear-based energy, pity, self-pity, jealousy, anger, whatever. And if I am feeling bad, I am taking the energy that comes from my I am presence, my higher self, and I'm qualifying it with a fear-based vibration. And it's going right into these reservoirs and reinforcing these maelstroms. So I'm actually making it worse by feeling bad. I'm not helping raise the Earth, raise the collective consciousness. So I came to a point where I simply said, if I respect people's right to make the choices that cause them suffering, and if I respect my free will, my right to live the way I want, then I don't have to suffer because other people suffer. I don't have to put my attention on how people are suffering. And I think it's, I understand you could say, okay, so here you are. You are just saying that because you have walked this spiritual path and you think you have made progress on the spiritual path, you just become more narcissistic. You have, just like a narcissist, you have no empathy for the suffering of other people. And I understand that you could say that from a certain viewpoint. But when you look at it from another viewpoint, you realize that it really is a matter of understanding the equation of free will and accepting it. Because again, am I helping people by feeling bad? Or am I helping people by saying, I will demonstrate that you can be an embodiment on this very dense planet, yet be in a positive state of mind, where you're focused on something positive. You're focused on changing things for the better. You're focused, first of all, on changing yourself. And you demonstrate to other people, it is possible to change yourself so you don't suffer on this planet. You can live a life without suffering on this planet. And perhaps that can actually help some people. Perhaps that can actually inspire some people. Because they learn by example. You're setting an example. There's a different way to live. There's a different way to react than what most people are doing. And in today's age, I'm so old that I can remember a time when there was no internet. There was the evening news, there was newspapers, but you weren't bombarded with news from every corner of the world in all your waking hours. And so I looked at this and I thought, back then there were so many things I didn't know were happening on the planet. But the planet still managed to somehow go on, even though I didn't know about it. So today, there are so many things I can know, so many more things I can know. But will it actually help somebody? Because what I realized, of course, it overwhelms you. And so what I decided was that I decided I have to be selective in what I do with my attention. And I can't focus on every problem on earth, neither am I meant to. So I focus on certain issues that I feel are relevant to me. And I ignore the rest. I simply have to ignore certain things. I have to select things out because it overwhelms me. It's too much. And again, when you're overwhelmed, you're misqualifying energy with a lower vibration. And how does that help raise the earth? So I simply had to make these, what most people would call hard choices. But when I really came to understand the equation of free will, they weren't so hard choices to make after all. It was fairly easy for me to say, okay, I can deal with this. And so this was there was one element of it was the world situation. I don't have to focus on every problem that's out there. I don't have to look at everything they say in the news or on the internet. But there was also the personal aspect where I came to a point where I looked at how I had reacted to people in my life, in my personal relationships. And I realized that I also had this tendency to think that in a personal relationship, I had to help other people. I had to change other people. And I had actually attracted to myself some people that were very difficult to change because they were very closed-minded in a certain way. And this is a little bit ironic because, as I said, I found the spiritual path when I was 18. And after that, most of the people I knew, they were in some kind of spiritual movement, the same spiritual movement I was in. But yet, despite the fact that they were in some spiritual movement and they were open to looking at certain things about themselves, what I started to see in some people was that there were certain aspects of their psychology they were not open to looking at. And I can see that I knew some people that I tried to talk to them. I tried to show them this. And I couldn't, it looks like my father, I couldn't find a way to say it that helped them see it. And I had to realize at some point, that even spiritual people can be in the school of hard knocks. Because even though they are on a spiritual path, in a spiritual movement, they're not really willing to look at the beam in their own eye. And again, I had to say, okay, but is it then my job to change these people? And as I said, I came to that point, I just resigned. I don't need to change anybody. I'm not here to change other people. So what am I here for? Change myself. Look at myself. The only thing I can control is my psychology. I can't control other people's psychology. I don't want to control other people's psychology, but I can control my own. And so I started looking at this, and I started looking at the fact that I had attracted some of these people that were very set in their ways, had these very strong reactionary patterns. And I started saying, okay, Kim, why have you attracted these kind of people? What do I need to learn from it? And the first thing I considered was, do I have a certain tendency to be stubborn? Do I have certain things in my psychology that I'm not willing to look at? Or at least that I haven't been willing to look at so far. And this was constructive. It was something I needed to do, because I needed to look at myself and say, okay, did I choose to embody with people like this so that by seeing how close-minded they are, I can come to see how close-minded I am in certain respects? And I did have various insights about myself and my own psychology, and where I was too focused on myself. But some of the insights are what I've described here. That I was way too focused on changing other people, and I thought that I was the one who had to change myself so I could change other people. I always had to find a way to change other people. And this was really a hang-up in my psychology. It was really one of these subconscious selves, very strong subconscious self, because you see what I realized that it did is I was so focused on changing other people that it gave me an excuse for not looking at certain things in myself. And when I realized that, I was able to gradually shift and start looking at these things in myself. Whether I completed that process, I don't know, but I'm still looking, and I am willing to look. But the other thing that I came to realize is that there are some people I can't change. And what I needed to do was step outside of this and say, why do I feel that I have to change other people? That I should be able to change other people? Why? And this is something that I think is specific to avatars. I don't think that the original inhabitants of the earth can grasp this. I don't think fallen beings could understand it whatsoever. But I started seeing that there's a very subtle difference in the way I related to Earth compared to how the original inhabitants relate to Earth. And really, when it comes right down to it, as an avatar, you can look at most people that are suffering. And I came to realize that I'm not suffering like they are. Even if I'm exposed to the same conditions, I'm not suffering the way they are. Because there's nothing on earth that I really take seriously. In other words, it's like I know intuitively nothing on earth actually defines me. Nothing on earth defines me. So people who are exposed to poverty, or people who are in a work situation where they are being abused by a superior, it didn't make me suffer quite the same way. I didn't take it as seriously. It was almost like I came to realize that I have a certain inner core of my being, and nothing on earth can touch it. Everything that's causing any kind of disturbance or suffering is in the periphery of my being. And I realized that the original inhabitants of the earth, most of them don't have that inner core. because they are so tied to Earth and the conditions on Earth that the conditions on Earth penetrate through their being. And what I'm trying to say with all of this, haven't really thought about this ahead of time, it's just coming to me, but what I'm trying to say with all this is that I then started looking at, okay, so the outer conditions on Earth is not what causes me to suffer here on Earth, but I am suffering because I have this tension. So what is it in me that causes my suffering? And of course, it's the subconscious selves, it's reactionary patterns, but what was I reacting to? And, this was a really, really hard thing for me to come to see. It took me a long time. And what I realized was that in my mind, I had what you might call a savior complex. The prince on a white horse. As I said, I didn't choose to come to Earth to indulge in earthly pleasures. I came here to help other people. So, I saw myself as the prince on the white horse, who came here to rescue the damsel in distress, the people in distress, and get them out of suffering. And so here you are, as I've talked about in my other videos. You come to Earth, you are literally attacked by the fallen beings who are trying to make you feel that you were wrong for coming to Earth, you shouldn't have come here. So you have this birth trauma, and as a result of the birth trauma, you begin to doubt that you can do what you came here to do. You begin to feel powerless, that maybe I can't make a difference on this planet. Maybe it was futile to come here. Maybe it was a mistake to come here. It was a miscalculation that I came here. I should never have come here. And I went through all of this, it took me again some time to process all of these feelings. But what I came to was this realization that all of this desire to change the Earth, change other people, remove suffering, that was my outer reason for coming to Earth. That was my outer reason, my outer excuse, so to speak. But the real reason I came to Earth was to resolve something in my own psychology. I thought I was here to change other people, but I was really here only to change myself. And the reason for this was that on a natural planet, I hadn't resolved the enigma of free will. And I've talked about free will in several of my videos. And really, you could say that free will is the central enigma for us who are self-aware beings, who are co-creators. It's the central enigma. How does free will work? How do you balance your personal, individual free will with the free will of other people? How do you deal with this? And on a natural planet, you don't have the same dynamic you have on Earth, because on a natural planet, the vast majority of beings there are not trying to manipulate the free will of others. They are just trying to improve themselves. So you don't have this dynamic that there are people who are trying to force others and therefore causing this intense suffering. It's not that people aren't suffering on some natural planets. There are different, of course, gradations of natural planets. But on the ones that are kind of on a lower level of evolution, they're still suffering, but people see it as, I'm suffering because of something in my own psychology, not because you're doing something to me. And so there are beings on natural planets who can resolve this enigma of free will on a natural planet and ascend, but some of us couldn't, and I couldn't. And this is what I came to realize. The Prince on the White Horse syndrome wanted me to feel that, oh, I was so advanced when I was on a natural planet. It was like I had reached the highest level of growth I could reach, and therefore I volunteered to come to Earth to be the Prince on the White Horse. But really, I came to see that part of the reason was that I hadn't resolved the enigma of free will. I hadn't worked out in my mind how free will actually works and how to deal with the fact that people can use their free will to do these things that cause them and others such intense suffering. And how do you deal with this? And so this is, I won't say this was my final processing, because I'm still in embodiment and maybe there are still things I haven't seen, but this was a really big relief for me to come to that point. because it helped me realize that I need to stop projecting, like I've said, I need to stop projecting that the problem is out there. What I need to look at in order to be free from Earth, in order to be able to ascend from Earth, is my own psychology, my own attitude, my own approach to Earth, to free will. And hopefully I've given you some pointers that can help you as an avatar start processing these things. And perhaps there's more that I will see that I haven't seen, but then I can always make another video when I start seeing it. So this is what I feel was coming for now, and I hope this has helped you get started on that same process, because really by dealing with these things, by processing these things, I have become much more at peace, much more freer being here on Earth. And it's helped me actually allow myself to kind of enjoy certain aspects of life on Earth. I mean, if you're here, and this is something I saw and I've seen in many spiritual people, even many religious people, you have this via dolorosa, that you should abstain from all worldly pleasures. You shouldn't enjoy life whatsoever. And why should we have that as spiritual people? Why shouldn't we say, okay, I'm on this planet, it has certain characteristics, it has certain things you can do that are enjoyable. Why shouldn't I enjoy it while I'm here? And I hope you can come to the same point, and where you can feel that the tension has gone out of you. The tension has gone out of life. You're not so uptight about everything. You're not so focused on yourself. Because this is, essentially you could say, this is what I started realizing, is that all of my life, and probably for all the way back to my birth trauma, I had been so focused on myself. Always thinking, how do I look? What do other people think? What do I think about myself? What should I, do? What should happening? And I've come to the point where I can I can just be, I can just experience, I can just express, and it's just a much more peaceful state to be in. And I'm catching myself thinking that this would be good for other avatars to be in this state of mind. But what do I know? What's good for you? How do I know? All I'm saying is, it's been good for me. So you decide what it means for you.